Welcome. Trying something different here tonight. Ross and I do need to know all the time, but occasionally we do other things. He's got his new podcast, Reality Check, which is fantastic, and you should check it out over at News Nation. And this one's called Point of Contact, which is kind of a new one where I can put my stuff that's not about need to know. And so we're trying that. And I'm so excited to try it today with my other great partner in the UFO world, which is Richard Dolan. Richard, welcome. And I'm so glad to see you again, even virtually. We did this together and I had such a good time doing it. So welcome. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bryce. It's a pleasure. I always enjoy working with you in whatever capacity. So this is fun to be here.
It happened so long ago, as we both know. I think it was 2010 that we started doing this. And, I just think we ought to just have some fun here. I remember that the reason we met is I had loved your first two books, UFOs and the National Security State. And I think I called you to say, can I option these books? And then we started talking about it, and we started talking about the post-disclosure world. And we said, we really ought to write that book. And people have lamented for years that somehow I talked you into doing that, and you never wrote volume 3 of UFOs in the National Security State. Are you ever going to write that volume?
Yeah, it's all your fault, Bryce. Thanks a lot for that. I will. I definitely will. It's absolutely on my to-do list. It's a funny thing. So I wrote a very large history, which was the first volume of that, and then a very even larger, which covered the next period of time up to the end of the Cold War. And so writing contemporary history was always a very daunting project for me. I was actually really hesitant. I always told myself I'm going to do it, but there was always something that made me feel I didn't have enough information, or that I needed to do more. So I did other projects, and After Disclosure with you that was very unexpected. But even after that was finished, we worked very efficiently on that, of course. By 2011, in theory, I could have jumped right back into working on my third volume of the National Security State series. And I didn't do that. I actually ended up writing a book called UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, that was a project that just kind of happened. I'm very glad I wrote that book, but it took me away from my third volume of history. And then I started to think about that again. I nearly was going to walk away from the UFO field for a while and do a whole study on the history of false flags, completely non-UFO related. In fact, I have a lot of research on the history of false flags. And I did do a series for Gaia TV on that subject. But then I came back to full-time UFO research, and then I don't really know why it's taken so long to do the third volume, but it will happen. So now I
know why, though. I think I know why. I've read your UFOs and for the 21st Century Mind in its original version, and I think just within the last 2 years you've completely updated it, added a lot of new material. That's my go-to book, by the way. I own multiple copies of it, and I give it to friends, and I'll say, I want you to read this. Since you've asked me, people will come to me now and go, they used to treat me like the drunk uncle at the wedding, right? Oh, don't mention UFOs to Bryce. My God, he'll talk your ear off. But now they come to me and they say, what do you know about this? Mm-hmm. And so while I'll tell them, obviously what you can tell them at a party in 5 minutes isn't very conclusive. So I will often give your book to someone and say, if you really want to know what's going on, just read this. It'll catch you up to date and you'll sort of understand the topic. And then I also say to them, but I'm not giving it to you. I expect you to give it back to me so I can give it to somebody else, because, people, that's what would happen. And it's been very successful. A lot of people, I guess I'm just giving you credit for having done what I wish somebody had done even earlier, which is to write a very accessible book that brings you up to speed completely. And I kind of am curious, did you think when you were writing UFOs in the 21st Century Mind that you were writing that kind of book?
Yes. Absolutely. I wanted that book to be the single best one-volume go-to source on the subject at the time that I wrote it. I absolutely wanted that to be the case. That book came about because I had gotten connected to an online university, believe it or not, called the International Metaphysical University. They essentially hired me to teach a course and to design the course. An introduction to UFOs. Essentially, that's what it was, in a series of extended lectures. So I did that, and I said to them, "I'll do this, but I'm going to turn this into a book." So, I was very, very particular about how I wanted to go about organizing that book, and I wanted it to be exactly the kind of book that you are using it for, to give it to, let's say, an intelligent skeptic who just has the question, what's this all about? Is there anything going on here? And so there's the history of the UFO, UAP phenomenon in there, absolutely. But there's also the history of the politics of it. But there's also the history of the science, our understanding of the science, of the crazy science of UFOs. And, the development of the sociological aspects of the phenomenon, and the development of ufology, the study of it, and then looking into the future as well. So I wanted it to be a kind of one-stop shop that is not shallow. I wanted to go deep, but I wanted it to be concise. So that was the goal.
And let's face it, that latest version that got expanded was meticulously done. I mean, I know it well enough to say, oh, I see what he added here. That's very interesting. And what I also thought, and this has never been done to the best of my knowledge. I've often said after writing our book together, I think we made the point in the book that after we all kind of come to the conclusion we're not alone, that the history books are going to have to be rewritten. And I'm the son of a history teacher. My father taught American history in high school, and you're obviously a historian by training. And I would love someday for there to be a book that talks about, even if it was just as limited as the post-World War II era in the world, that wove the history of the world at the time with the history of the UFO thing. Because what we have books about sort of normal history that you'll get in class. Right. And then we have books that are called UFO books. And never the twain shall meet. And I would just think that is the book that somebody's going to write someday, and probably soon. What do you think?
UFOs in the national security state was something of an attempt to do that, but of course with the strong focus on UFOs, but to place the UFO history within the context of a broader global history. But what I think you're pointing out has not been done, which is a world history that includes the UFO phenomenon or UAP phenomenon.
Right. Because it would be completely, if someone set out to pitch, I'm going to write a history book, but it's going to accept the UFO issue as a legitimate issue, they probably couldn't find a conventional publisher that would let them do that yet. Yeah. The one thing I think
you're getting closer, though. I think you are.
Just so people won't be confused, there are two versions of our original book, AD After Disclosure. This is the one we did for Keyhole Publishing, which is your publishing company, which I don't think is in use right now by you. And then this is the one we set up with New Page Books, where they made us cut 20% of the book. So this is the longer version. But I'd like you to clear up one mystery about this one, if you can. Sure. I saw this on Amazon.com the other day for something like $871.
All right.
Now, nobody's going to buy this book for $800. How does that happen? Why is this?
That's simple. That's easy.
How do they do that?
So the book's that version's out of print. It's been out of print for years.
Right.
And although I think I still have a case or two lying around somewhere, but it's just sitting in the boxes. What happens is that people will have an out of print book, and they will offer it on Amazon, like knowing if it's out of print, it could absolutely elicit a price. There's nothing stopping anybody from being their own distributor, their own seller. You can create an Amazon seller account, and You can put up any price you want for whatever it is you're selling. Whoever is offering that book acquired it or purchased it at some point in their life, and they are.
And just so I'm clear, this book again that you published through Keyhole Publishing is not available any longer. So you can't buy this book from Keyhole because Keyhole doesn't exist. Right. Yeah. Okay. So hence we get the $871 version.
That's it.
We're sorry about that, folks. But again, you can read this version. Now I do recall.
Well, it just shows how cool and valuable that original first edition is. So
I love it though. I literally, honestly, I remember when we had to cut it and the new page people said, I think we were at 105,000 words or something.
Oh, look, it was 130.
Oh, okay.
And they said, we'd like you to cut it to 100,000. Right. And I started throwing dishes and plates across the room at them. I was so mad.
Rich, there's entire chapters missing.
And the second chapter is gone, which we did was on our take on Ancient Aliens at that time, and we just cut it out.
And the other thing, as long as we're talking about this, in the second version, the thing that makes me crazy, which we have zero control over, it's like, I don't know what computer program they use to come up with the final section of it where you can actually, the index, where you can go look up things, but it's insane. It's the worst index I've ever seen of anything. And I don't even know how it happened. And I have people occasionally say to me, what were you guys thinking when you did that? And I go, well, we didn't. That part was out of our hands. So I'm just saying not our fault, folks.
I still publish my own books, and I like doing that. And I'm fanatical about my indexes. I like to have very detailed indexes. All of the books that I published, including our original version, had a good index.
Excellent indexes. And in fact, I just went to Shag Harbor in Nova Scotia to speak, and I got out your original version. Now, you had two versions of UFOs in the National Security State.
Yes, the first edition anyway.
And I have both, but I went back and literally to refresh my memory on what happened, I went back and went to your index, which again was great. Laid it all out. I know it's a lot of work, but boy, it sure makes it the better reference volume. Okay.
And the one that Hampton Roads published, that index was not as good.
No, not at all.
No,
which is why I go to the very first one. So I guess you're proving a point. Sometimes if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. So just to follow up on that, what has it been like to be a publisher who specializes in UFO material? Why did you start doing that in the first place? And why did you stop doing it? I understand you do publish your own things now, but you used to publish other people's books.
I did, yes, yeah. Well, I'm glad I went through that process, but I became a publisher just because here I am in the 1990s, not knowing anything. I had never written a book before. I had no knowledge of how I was going to get my book published. When I first started researching UFOs in the 90s, I assumed I would finish the book and I would look for a publisher and essentially beg some publisher to take my book. Which is what everyone else had always done forever. And at some point in the process, and I actually don't recall exactly when this was, but I thought maybe I can be my own publisher. And in the late 90s, that was a lot more difficult than it is today. In the late 90s, there was no print on demand. You couldn't become a seller for Amazon, which is very convenient to work with as a publisher, where they would just do print on demand. So back in those days, I had to upfront a lot of money for me to purchase my first 1,200 copies of that book.
Right.
So I had to go into minor debt. In fact, I borrowed that money from my Aunt Joan. Thank you, Aunt Joan. I'm still very grateful. Paid her back pretty soon, but she upfronted money for me so that I could purchase the books. So then I get the books delivered to my house, where they were sitting in a huge, massive pyramid in my dining room. And now I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got all these books. How do I sell them now? This is the year 2000. So it was not easy. You still were thinking of the model of having them in bookstores. You had to go establish a relationship with distributors, because bookstore chains do not want to deal with individual publishers. There's a zillion of us. So they just want a few distributors. And so everyone's got to wet their beak. And I collected, established relationships with some distributors. But that really was never a successful thing for me. What was successful early on, I created my website, a very bare bones website. And I was able to sell the book on the website. And we just did our own shipping out of the house for quite a few years. That's how we did it. And I was lucky in that early on, I was able to get a few folks in the UFO community to become aware of my book and to like it. So there was UFO Magazine, which was quite active at that time. And they gave a rave review of my book. Actually, Don Ecker did that. I was really grateful for that. Whitley Strieber was one of the early people who somehow learned about me. He had me on a guest on his show. So I was able to get a couple of interviews, and it just worked out that over the next few years, I was able to develop my name. I actually became a writer for a while of UFO Magazine, which gave me a bit of a wider audience, and it just slowly built. I became a publisher for other authors because, especially in those years, I guess I'll say this, I was always scraping by. I had no money. I was very, very, very difficult to make a living. I had a family. I had 2 kids I was raising, and it was a challenge. And I thought, well, if I can become, I figured out how to publish my own books. And so maybe I could be a publisher for other people as well. And I developed a stable of 10 to 12 other authors at my peak that I was publishing for. But that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and keeping everyone happy, and then figuring out how do I pay these authors? Do I do it? At first, I wanted to do it monthly, which is insane. Who does that?
Nobody.
No. And then I thought, well, maybe we can go quarterly. I knew nothing. I had no knowledge of the industry. They pay you once a year. That's, if you're lucky. But it was a lot to keep up with, all the bookkeeping and all of that. And the truth was, I was hitting a ceiling. It's like, how many authors can I bring in? Is it really worth it financially? And honestly, it really wasn't. And so around the time of 2013, 2014, I started to think, 2015, I think, I don't really want all of this. It's more of a hassle. I wanted to publish my own books. And so I just worked out arrangements with each of the authors to give them their books, and they are the publisher. They're in charge of their own books. And I think we're all happier that way.
I just remember, Rich, one of the greatest moments of my life, I guess short of being a father and things like that, was the day a box came to my house, and I opened it up, and it was full of those hardcover AD books. Because, I've been a TV and film writer, producer, and a journalist, but those are all kind of ephemeral. They go out there, and then they're in the theaters, and they're gone, or they're on TV, and then nobody can find them again. And I just remember literally taking out these books and holding them and looking at them, and they had weight, they had mass and volume, and it was such a wonderful feeling. And I've never gotten over it. I've done 3 books. I'm writing my 4th, and I don't think anything replaces it. It's nice to see the other.
I like Surrounded by Enemies quite a lot, by the way. I just want to tell you.
Thank you. That's really. I mean, I just think it's something that people, that's why the self-publishing business is so big in this world, because people do like that. But I also think you got to bring the quality, which is something you've always done. That's why your books are so well supported. The other thing I just wanted to follow up. By the way, I own a UFO magazine with you on the cover of it. I remember those days when you were writing for them. So I do have that. The other thing, though, is you mentioned your sort of evolution. Now you're a guy that has your own Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. It's sort of the brand name for you, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, currently. I think I've been talking with my people about this, and we may move into some other interesting directions soon. But
okay, so I'd love to hear that, but let's back up for a second. At one point, you made a decision to sort of say, I'm going to express my views not only as a writer, but I'm also going to embrace this bold new world of podcasting. But also, you're sort of beyond podcasting on some of your stuff. You're a regular appearance, right? And sometimes you're behind a paywall, sometimes you're not. What's your whole take on what your brand is and how you do it these days?
It's constantly evolving, Bryce. We're in such a dramatically transformative period of human history. Everything is moving so fast. I constantly have to ask myself, what is the best means by which I can do the work that I'm interested in doing? Back, when I was a younger man in the 1990s, I thought of myself exclusively as a writer. And I've still always felt that that's my best skill, is writing historical and also, let's say somewhat political or philosophical works. I think about that a lot, but as a writer, fundamentally. And then comes the 21st century. And before long, I find that I'm sitting in front of a camera doing interviews or on a stage doing a lecture. These are things I had never really anticipated. And then as the century moved on, being in front of a camera for interviews and podcasts, and then my own YouTube channel. So it's constantly evolved. And I don't know that I've really figured out or decided on what's the optimal methodology for me to get my message. But ultimately, I always will think of myself first and foremost as a writer, even though I think most people don't know me as a writer. They probably just know me from YouTube or maybe from Ancient Aliens. But for me, I'm a writer, and I'm a researcher, and I enjoy the written word. It's what I love to do. The USO project that I'm completing now, these are all difficult projects, but they're also a joy because I happen to love the process of writing and editing. I enjoy it. And I think that if there's a skill that I have, that's a skill that I like to use. So I don't know where this will evolve moving forward. Our technology is driving a lot of these changes that and these decisions that I'm making is how to present myself. And there may be a day at some point where we're all going to be virtual reality and a holographic display in someone's visor or someone's eye implant. And what will that mean? How will I present myself in that environment? I don't know. In a world of brain-computer interfaces, I don't know. So it's one step at a time. I got to figure this out.
I think we all like that you appear in different formats. I think that's great, and I appreciate you doing this today, of course. One thing, as you evaluate your brand name, you'll probably make it shorter because Richard Dolan's intelligent disclosure gets cut off sometimes. And you have to, when you're on X or something like that, you have to go, gee, I wonder, could it be Dolan's intelligent disclosure? Maybe it's just Dolan's disclosure, DD. We'll call it DD. That's the kind of thing the reductionist thinking people have to do. I just remember one thing. I do respond to how carefully and qualitatively good you are as a writer. I've read a lot of UFO books, and many of them are good in terms of the research they bring out, but they're not clear in terms of the writing. And I remember when we were writing, you gave me a book and said, you should read this. And it was a book called Clear and Simple as the Truth.
It's still my favorite book on the subject.
I want you to tell us why you think so and what it has meant to you.
Yeah, actually, it's two authors, and I cannot recall their names at the moment, but I found that book in the mid-90s, and it really affected me very strongly. We all know that if you look at art history or music history, there are different periods that people will refer to. So in music, there's the classical period, there's the romantic period, there's the Baroque period, there's the modernist period, and so forth. Same with art, but with writing, the authors point out there are a variety of styles as well that constitute, a coherent manner of written expression. They identify what they call classic prose, but they also identify something they call romantic prose. And there's a variety of other styles and formats. All of that makes sense because as a writer, different writers are trying to accomplish different things. But what this particular book was about was classic prose as they defined it. I think their particular favorite model were the 17th century French writers who they said, but they made a good point. They said, if you're French, those writers, I think like Blaise Pascal might be one and probably a few others. They said it's as easy to read them today as it was back then because there's a certain approach that they had to writing. It's not simple, it's not plain, but it is clear, it's elegant. But what it mostly is characterized by is the philosophical attitude toward truth. And to them, this is what characterizes the difference between writing styles. How do you perceive truth? So in classic prose, what they say this is the enabling assumption that makes classic prose so valuable. It is that you perceive that there is such a thing as truth. It exists. Truth, objective truth exists.
What a shocker in today's world, but go ahead.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's definitely not postmodernist. They say, and they also say, look, the title of the book is Clear and Simple as the Truth. And they say, we know truth is not clear and it's seldom simple, but our enabling assumption is that truth is there. And furthermore, that you, as a writer, have the ability to perceive that truth. And furthermore, that you have the ability to communicate that truth clearly, as though through a clear pane of glass. Now, that gives a certain power to the writing. Academic writing is not classic style prose at all. And a trained and qualified academician is qualifying everything. You read an academic monograph and there's parenthetical statements throughout the whole piece, which makes it perhaps more accurate, but also can slow the reader down and can maybe obfuscate as much as clarify it many times. And so that's a different approach to truth. There's romantic writing, which is subjective truth, your internal dialogue, where truth is only your reflection of what you believe, and that can take you into a whole different style of writing. So for classic prose, they're not saying that it's the best of all time, but they're saying if you want to write good classic prose, this is what you do. And when I read that book, I instinctively realized that was always my philosophy. It's always been my philosophy. I'm not a postmodernist, never will be. I think it's a very destructive ideology, frankly, on every level. And intellectually, I don't think it's very helpful for me. So yes, my enabling assumption, and I think it's true most of the time, is that there is a truth. Why else would we be arguing about things like the JFK assassination or 9/11 or COVID if we didn't believe that there was a truth there? Yeah. Of course we believe there's a truth there. And so our job as researchers is to find out to the best of our ability what it is and explain it clearly with some elegance so that it lasts for all time. That's classic prose.
I love that you got to actually tell us what you feel there, because I bet you don't get asked about that very often.
No.
And I think it's important to you. It was important to me. In fact, that book that you gave me is sitting up on my shelf even right now next to The Elements of Style by Strunk and White, which is very pragmatic and practical stuff. And then this other one just asked you to think about a lot of things. And I will say that I remember very clearly how you approached editing, and I do it myself, which is, what can I take out?
Exactly.
And on the level of even paragraphs, or I rarely would take a chapter out, I guess, but sometimes you make something better by taking things out of it. Less is more, and
you have to be cold-blooded.
Yeah, and it applies to sentences. I mean, I do sort of blast through some writing, and then I'll go back and give a lot of attention to editing. And a lot of attention to editing usually means, what can I take out and what will make it more clear?
Absolutely.
And so even when we were forced to take the 30,000 words out of our book, there was a positive side in some respects because we had a second chance to look at it and say, well, what are the main points here and how can we make them a little more clearly?
I agree. And it actually makes the revised edition it's a faster read. It's a better read. That's the truth. I bitched and complained. I remember this. I did not want to.
Right.
But once we were in the process, it was obvious that the book was a better read overall. I will have to acknowledge that. When I do writing, I always look at 3 levels of organization of any document. You have the large meta organization. So how well does each section of the book or the project cohere like with each other? Is there a message that is coherent, and does it flow properly? That's the grand scale of organization. It's the most important level fundamentally. But then you have, intermediate levels. So maybe the level of a chapter or the level of a paragraph. I go to the paragraph. And then you have the level of the sentence. And when I edit my own work, as I've done with my current book project, I do it all. It's almost like a game. I will take a passage, I'll do a word count, and I'm a fanatic about my word counts. So if I have a passage that's, 700 words, I will look it over and I will ask myself, can I get this to 600 words or 550 without losing any meaning? Is that possible? And sometimes I can't get it that low, but sometimes I can get 100 words cut out. And usually on the 3rd or 4th or 6th or 7th time around, I'll see a way to phrase something better, with more punch, with fewer words. Because the other thing about as a writer, and really, whether it's television or anything else, is everything you present to the viewer or the reader comes at a price. Nothing's free. And the price is the reader's attention and their ability to give a damn about what you're doing. Because there's 1,000 other things they could do rather than read your book. Lots of other things. They could read someone else's book, or they can do something else entirely. So it is always your obligation as a content creator, as a writer, as a producer, to not to waste your reader's time. And so that means you say as much as you can in as few words as possible. And inevitably, if you do that, you're going to have a better outcome. But it means you write with passion, but you edit with an ice cold, with ice in your veins. And you've got to be willing to cut this passage that's I sweated and struggled over. If it doesn't help get to the end game, it's got to go out.
Amen, brother. And I have to say, I am a relentless editor of my own work, as you seem to be saying you are of yours. The issue that I've had to deal with in running a television show or whatever, if you're actually running the show, then you have to work with other writers to edit their material. And quite often that's difficult because people don't want to edit their material, or they see your comment as not one they want to do. So clearly, when you were trying to edit all these other books, that had to be insane to do. Some
were edited more than others. There were a few writers who presented me with a work that was fundamentally complete, and I didn't really feel a need to do anything with it. Other writers, who shall go nameless, presented me with a god-awful mess that I wondered, why did I even bother to publish this? And there were a couple of books that I just declined after I initially said yes, and then eventually said, no, I can't. Because I cannot publish this in good conscience without taking the next year out of my life to rewrite it. And I'm not going to do that. So, I used to have all of these rating scales and letter grades that I would assign to books. I don't really do that anymore, but there are books that are beautifully written. There are books that are competently written. There are books that they're good enough to get the information out there. And then there are books that fail on the basic level of organization. You wonder what the hell they're doing. But usually a competent book will be, if I get a book that I put at a B level, I'm overjoyed. A B level to me is like a competent journalist who knows how to punctuate and knows how to organize their stuff. And,
right.
And that's great.
That is good. But again, going back to our experience with AD After Disclosure, you've been kind enough to say from time to time when we've discussed this Sometimes you read it, you can't tell who wrote this or whatever. But I've never seen it that way, because clearly there were two voices being merged there. But I remember the origin of all of it, and I remember what made it so particularly special. And this is true of all the work I've done in partnership with people or collaboration with people. I was not only okay with you editing, I demanded it. I needed you to edit things because I felt like we got to get it through. There was a guy, one of us would have written something originally, but it had to go through the other guy's typewriter in order for it to merit being in the book. And so, although I can tell the origin, I do see that there's a lot of places where it was nice to hand off to the other guy and say, you know what, I've been on this for 2 weeks. I think it's time for you to take a look at it.
We had
whatever
great
you
system.
need to it.
We had a superb system, honestly. Yeah. And let me just tell the listeners, we created our table of contents, our themes, and we would you would take the lead on certain chapters, I would take the lead on other chapters. And I remember saying, we want a limit of 8,000 words per chapter. Yes. If we go over, okay, fine, but we're going to shoot for 8,000 words. But I remember thinking, like, if you were taking the lead on one chapter, I would ask you to stop at like 5,000 words and then hand it over to me. And I would do the same. I would take the lead on certain chapters and then hand them to you. And then once we did that, then we went back and forth and really did some edits.
I felt like you were talking a foreign language to me at the beginning because, my language in Hollywood is pages. And by pages, I mean script pages. Yeah. So, an hour drama traditionally was around 54 pages. So if somebody turned in 68 pages, I
remember we
got some cutting to do here, right? And a script, a feature film was traditionally 120, but really more like 110. And so I knew that language, but you started talking about words in the thousands, and it wasn't.
I was
something
a fanatic about that. I was a fanatic. Great. I remembered.
And I learned a lot because you. And I've just done it on this book I'm writing. I go, that looks like more than 8,000 words. I'm using the Dolan school of exercising some restraint on my own verbiage at this point. And I think it's interesting. I mean, I think all writers have to find their own way in this thing. And it's not very many people who actually do write. There are a lot of people who write screenplays together because you can sit in a room with your legs up and just go, I don't know, what if? And, you get to play that game and you're drinking your coffee and having a good time. But books are different. They require an inordinate amount of time. And nobody wants to waste their time. So in other words, if you and I had not worked out a strategy to write that book properly, we would have wasted a lot of time.
Undoubtedly.
Right. And that would have made us both crazy because we're both busy people. And so I don't know if we meshed because we were both pragmatic people or because we just felt like we were telling the same kind of story. But it was fascinating because, again, you knew the world, and I was remember in Night Shift, Michael Keaton is speaking into a tape recorder going, what if we feed mayonnaise to tuna? And I was that guy. I was going, I don't know, Rich, what if we do this? And yet it worked.
One thing that you did that was invaluable, you did a lot of things that were invaluable. So one was people should know, we were on the phone many, many days. And you were initiating these conversations more than I was, and someone needed to. So thank goodness you did, because we had to be going back and forth all the time to talk about the various themes in our book. So we did that. And also, I will just say, I think if someone was cracking the whip the most, that would be you. I think you were pushing us very hard every week to get more progress done. I had things that I know that I contributed in terms of wanting how to organize this and how we wanted to approach it. But in terms of pushing this project forward, that you really had a lot to do with that.
Well, you were talking, as I recall, you were the page guy. I mean, the word count guy. And what I was because when you produce television, you have to You have to know, when does pre-production start? How many days does it go? When does the first script have to be delivered for episode 1? When are we shooting it? When is it in editing and all that? And I started doing these charts and graphs that I'm sure were as unfamiliar to you as the word count was to me, which is, what is Bryce thinking of that we're going to do? And yet, you know, at the end of the day, I think we're both glad that we could get it off our backs, because when you're in the middle of writing a book, it can be an oppressive thing. And so I just wanted to ask you quickly, you're writing what started out to be a single book about USOs that has morphed into 3 books that you say you're going to deliver 2 months apart or something. Mm-hmm. What's your thinking on all this? How did you end up, I guess, underestimating how much work you were going to do for this work project? What happened?
It's not the first time I've done that.
Probably not.
One thing I just want to say, final thing about After Disclosure, and the thing that I am more proud of than anything else, is the originality of that book. And it doesn't get enough credit for that, in my opinion. What you and I did, this is almost 15 years ago, 14 years ago, in a very different world, a different universe, politically and ufologically. We did something nobody else ever bothered really to do, which was we sat down and seriously tried to envision how UFO secrecy might end. And once that were to happen, how it would transform our world. Nobody really seriously addressed that in any kind of sophistication or detail until we did. We were the first. There were other people who talked around it, talked about it. No one really went deep. We did. And that was not an easy thing to do. It's easy to improve on something, but it's hard to be the first.
We were, forget the USO question for just a moment, because we should follow up on that. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a radical idea, because I tried to even explain to people what it was over the years. You know, what's the resume way to explain what After Disclosure is? And mm-hmm. I call it speculative nonfiction.
Yeah, because that's a good way to put it.
Because I couldn't think of anything else that would quite make it clear. And I think we should follow this up for a little bit, because I realize I could almost title this show as Richard Dolan on Writing, which I do love. And I could talk to you for hours about the process of writing, because I think you've got a lot of wisdom on this. But let's do a little bit now about the book itself. We called it AD After Disclosure. Do you remember why we called it that?
That was your idea. I think you came up with that the AD part and After Disclosure. And I think that came out of your head. And when I heard it, I thought, wow, that's an awesome, I love that.
Because we were, as I have explained it over well, thank you for that. I remember thinking we were in a BC world going into transition to an AD world, because the actual, if disclosure was sort of the hard moment of, by the way, we're not alone, then there's the calendar up to that moment. And then there's almost a new calendar of mankind after that. And so when I explain it to people now, I go, BC is before confirmation and AD is after disclosure. Yeah. And so here's a question for you, because it hasn't been a hard cut. It's been a slow dissolve. We're probably in a slow dissolve toward that right now. Are we in a BC world, or are we moving into the AD world? Or
That's both? A great question. I don't know. When 2017 happened and the New York Times had their moment of putting those articles out, a lot of folks were like, is this disclosure? Are they disclosing? And I think what we are seeing is, I've felt this way almost from the beginning of this period, which is that we're in a factional war. That it is like a slow drip. So this is something that you and I did not really see fully. We, of course, we are not to be faulted here. I think everybody was looking at it the way we saw it too,
sure.
Which was that, you know, if there's a powerful UFO-related truth that were to come out, it would cause this kind of avalanche. People would be like, oh my God, it's true. You've been lying all this time. Right. What else have you been lying about? And then, you know, the roof caves in on the structure of power, whatever. And it's easy to see that happening. That still can happen.
Yes.
We're not, that's not out of the possibility. But what we have seen is this slow drip. I think the difference is when you and I wrote that book, social media was still very like open, kind of like the Wild West still. That has not been the case. And you could see from 2015, 2016 onward, social media has been step by step by step. Well, let's just say big tech in general. So the YouTube algorithms, YouTube started shadow banning and then out banning all kinds of people. And you see this centralized system of censorship, let's just say it for what it is, come into play and create a much more comprehensive system of control over public narratives. So I think what it was easy to underestimate, which I feel we did, let's just say it, is the resistance of the establishment to an obvious truth that is revealed. I mean, when the ATIP program was revealed in 2017, that had the potential for people to say, oh my God, you're saying all this time you haven't researched UFOs, and you did, you lied.
Right.
And it did, but it did not go anywhere. Why not? Look at the mainstream media coverage of it. I argue constantly with my friend Steve Bassett about this, our friend Steve Bassett. Steve's always saying, oh, the media is all over this. And I'm like, no, the media is not all over this. Not really. The major media, you think about 2017, 2018, there's some interviews with Lou Elizondo. Tucker Carlson on Fox was an outlier. Who else? No one. And then they fired him anyway. There's no one in the major media really taking this issue. We're friends with Ross Coulthart. Ross is great. He's on News Nation. They're not ABC Nightly News, okay?
Right.
It's not that level. So when you get to the level of the major media, there is a control system. It is in place, and they play hardball. They have not given up. So I think that's what's slowed this process down. So what we've seen is there have been some truth bombs that have come out. They are powerful, but let's face it, I've got family, you've got family, we've got friends. Most people, their heads are not in this subject. And furthermore, most people are fairly passive consumers of their news and of their culture. That's the reality. They don't have time to dig deep and fight the power and go below the surface. And so if the major establishment media is not covering this, guess what? Most people are still not really going to be engaged. And therefore, this gives the establishment the opportunity to slow walk this as much as possible, just to not comment, no matter how worked up the UFO community is over these things. But, we have to remind ourselves, we can easily, we live in a little bubble too, just like everybody else. And so when important news comes out that we're like, this is incredible, why isn't the rest of the world talking about it? Well, that's what happens when you live in a bubble. And we're expanding that bubble. We're doing a great job at expanding it. If you look at it like a football game, we're the offense, they're the defense.
Yeah.
And they've had a great defense for generations. And our offense has been a little, need to replace the quarterback. We need a couple of new running backs. Well, we're getting a better team now.
Yeah.
So we're actually able to move that ball down the field better, but there's still a good defense in front of us. And so it will be interesting to see how this goes moving forward, because we've never had a period in history where the pro UFO UAP side of it is as persistent as it seems to be now.
Well, it raises a question that you and I grappled with, although I think in retrospect, we weren't as clear about this as we might have been, which is, what does the word disclosure mean? Because I've talked to people over the years, and people use it in a variety of different ways. And I'm talking ufologically. There's disclosure as a legal term and all that for other things. But just in terms of disclosure, people literally have different, for some people, it's got to be the president steps to the podium, but then other people have different things. So I was just going to say, let's take a second here and see if we can figure out what defines the word disclosure to you.
To me, we know we've got kind of a broken system. All right, let's just put it right out there. This is beyond political party. There have been studies There's a famous study, I think, out of Yale 10, 15 years ago that showed fairly conclusively the United States is an oligarchy. It's always been. It is one now. We like to talk about our democracy, but whose democracy is it real? We have a system that maybe of necessity, I don't know, but it's not what we like to tell ourselves it is. We like to tell ourselves all these wonderful stories about the kind of political system we have. But what I will always believe in is that the government is responsible to its citizens, to its people. And so therefore, I do believe that disclosure of the UFO, we'll say UFO subject, should be from the President of the United States, who is the highest elected representative of the people. That's his or her job, is to represent the nation. Now, we could go internationally. Maybe you could say the Secretary General of the United Nations. In theory, that could work, but in practice, that's not a powerful enough position. The President of the United States, though, is. President of Russia, President of China. Those would be appropriate.
The Pope.
The Pope, yeah, you've got a few, that's right, a few people that could conceivably do it. And so as an American citizen, I would say it remains important to hold the president and our elected officials accountable for this, because otherwise it's just like giving up. It's completely giving up on any hope and any belief in the fact that your government represents you. I've heard people say for years, we don't need the government to disclose, we know the truth. Yeah, that's true, but it does make a difference. It matters. To me, I don't want to live in a society that's essentially a fascist or totalitarian system in which there's no opacity to my government, in which the government, it just dictates to me what the revealed knowledge and truth is, which is really what we have moved into these days and into this century. I'm not interested in that type of a country. I don't want that kind of a country for me. And I'm sure that any listener would feel the same way. So for that reason, I say disclosure is important, not simply as a matter of science, not simply as an existential philosophical issue, are we alone in the universe, but as a political, for freedom. For free. How else can you put it? For freedom. It matters. So therefore, I'm always going to believe in this, even though I know the wheels have fallen off the system for a long time. But can we put them back on? Is it possible? Maybe. We have to keep working at it. Otherwise, what's the alternative?
I'm going to work on that because we got to wrap it up soon. But let's work on that definition one bit more. I would think that disclosure has to have kind of a modified definition from the president or the Pope or someone, although that's nice and that would be clear disclosure, but maybe it's also when some form of officials, globally or nationally or whatever, enough officials in positions of knowledge confirm that we're not alone, that a majority of the population can believe that we just haven't quite gotten so in that we're not at disclosure yet, because we're still what we've got right. People coming forward who are whistleblowers and all that, but that's not quite disclosure yet. That's very, very soft disclosure. Hard disclosure is not.
I don't even think it's. I agree. I don't even think this is disclosure at all. I think disclosure to me is our official established power structure, our government, that is.
Right.
Admitting, disclosing. Right. I mean, that we use that word for a reason, to disclose what they know in a truthful, non-deceptive manner. Yeah. Even if it's not 100%, it's not deceptive.
And that's pretty much what our book is about. Yeah, what happens when that event is achieved? I'd say we are nearing what I would call a confirmation period, where we're not disclosing in an honest, truthful way, but we are sort of confirming that these things are real, which is different than it was a while ago. We are sort of all officially confirming to ourselves in a very unofficial way that they're real. My friends don't have any doubt anymore that they're real, and they might have had when I wrote that book with you. So it's interesting, though, just one thought. When we first put this book out, the hardcover, everybody's got a subtitle. Our subtitle to AD After Disclosure hardcover was The People's Guide to Life After Contact. So I think it was more of a populist volume. I think we were trying to say, you know, you can't trust the government to actually tell you what it knows. So we're going to prepare you for what's to come since they're not doing it for you. Right. And then when this book comes out, the publisher put a subtitle on it that we were not allowed to change. And that publisher wrote, when the government finally reveals the truth about alien contact. I'm not saying either is right or wrong. It's just an interesting thing, because when you were talking about the idea of censorship or whatever, censorship doesn't always come from the government. I mean, look at the media, the big media you're talking about. They censor themselves on this topic. And so did our publisher. Even though our publisher wanted to publish a book like that, they felt that they should put their 2 cents worth in on the actual title of the book.
Yeah. They
I'm kind of curious, looking back on it, which one do you prefer?
Actually, I didn't like theirs when it first came out, but over the time, over years that have gone by, when the government finally reveals the truth about alien contact, probably more accurate.
I think so. I think it was a little naive. I'm sure I pushed that first subtitle, and I think it was naive. I think the second one is more accurate. And in fact, as you pointed out, the 2 alternative history books that I wrote following it up use that kind of, it's a what if. This is a what if book. And what we haven't talked about in our 50 minutes here that we may talk about some other day, I just felt like it would be kind of, we've gone over this territory. You talk about it on your show. I've talked about it before. So I thought we don't need to just retread everything in the book. People can read it if they want or whatever, look at our videos. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the process, because I think that's intriguing.
I always enjoy it.
This book did, it's sort of like we played a game of Jeopardy. Every day, one of us would ask the other, I'll take government for 50. Right? Where we were trying to say, well, what happens when, and let's just enumerate for people what we went through: government, medicine, politics, economy, military,
popular culture, academia,
science, technology. Once we opened that door, Rich, it was like, it became vast, because there really isn't anything. If we have a form of disclosure, as you described in your description, if something like that happens, even though we are being somewhat prepared right now, I would agree that we are moving in a direction, maybe, but it's still going to be a mind blower when it actually is official. It is interesting, though. And I'll just sort of make this my conclusion. I thought when we were writing the book that the idea that somehow we would be slowly acclimated, I didn't think that could happen quite. I sort of felt like something would have to happen, like a sighting, incontrovertible, that somebody would have to comment on it. But they've actually pulled the hat trick off so far, which is they're not really confirming anything. They're letting whistleblowers do the talking. But yet it is in the background of a lot of this media. They haven't taken it seriously, but in terms of slow walking it, they have slow walked it a little bit.
Well, yeah, I want to be very careful here, because I don't think that I can say they are slow walking disclosure, because that implies that there is actually a plan at the top of the pyramid to say, all right, we're going to make this, we're going to roll this out. And I don't think that's what's happened. There are people who think that's the case. I think we're looking at a faction from within that establishment. People like Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, they're very establishment guys. I mean, they've worked in the government. Mellon's very high level, but people need to understand, every government that's ever existed, especially within every empire that's ever existed, it's always going to have factions. Caesar against Pompey 2,000 years ago. It's no different. You have factions. Everyone's going to disagree as to how the empire should be managed. And everyone's going to disagree within the military industrial complex as to how the UFO, UAP subject should be handled. They don't all agree. Chris Mellon, Lou, Hal Puthoff, we can put him in the mix now. He's out there. insiders, various insiders, have different opinions, and they have successfully been able to organize and get their message out. I think that's what has happened. There's still all kinds of resistance. So what we call slow walking, I think, is really a tug of war.
I think you're right. I sort of withdraw the objection, Counselor. I think that is a more accurate thing. I do remember, though, as we were writing it, though, we thought it's probably true that they should have a plan, but there seems to be no evidence that anybody's got a real plan. So I think we wrote the book thinking that not just average people might read it, but people who were supposedly knowledgeable about this topic would at least start thinking in the right areas about how to manage this new world we're going to inherit.
I think that succeeded. I think we accomplished that very well. We can look back over the last 14, 15 years and see, oh, what did we not notice back then? Well, that's easy to do, but what we did that was impressive. I'm always going to maintain this is we got a lot more right than what we missed. And I think what we recognize fundamentally is the revolutionary element of genuine disclosure, which in turn explains pretty well today why the establishment that is still intransigent on maintaining this secret, and there is still a very powerful secrecy faction that has a tremendous influence. They're not giving up. The UAP Disclosure Act just failed for a second year in a row, fell flat on its face.
Yep.
So we can see that there are tremendous obstacles ahead. My biggest fear for this is something you can relate to this because you did a very fine book on JFK. You think about the JFK assassination today, 60 plus years after the fact. 90% of Americans and 100% of the rest of the world knows that JFK was killed in a conspiracy. Like everyone knows that it happened. And still, there is no official recognition of that fact. Officially speaking, the United States government relies on the fiction, the malicious, malevolent fiction that he was killed by a lone gunman. And it's a malevolent fiction because they didn't just kill Kennedy. They killed Oswald. They killed dozens of people around this. They murdered all of those people and got away with it. Why? Because it was a coup d'etat.
Yeah.
That's what Jim Marrs called it. Great researcher on this. And he was absolutely right. It was a coup d'etat. In open public. They murdered a president in open public. So here we are 6 decades later, and we still, despite all of our knowledge, all of the cultural, yes, we know that it was done this way. There's still no recognition. There's no justice on that. And that's like an open sore on our body politic. And my fear is that this will happen with the UFO UAP reality, which is that increasing numbers of people are going to know the truth, but will it actually matter? The secrecy can still maintain itself. We still have a public that's no attention span, hooked to their devices, bouncing around like ping pong balls in a wind tunnel for every new thing that comes along. There's no focus on this matter. And therefore, it's very easy. I think it's entirely possible, very easy in a future 24/7 surveillance state. Everything's monitored. The system is in place. They could just keep this going decades.
Man, you have raised because one of the things we did in this book is we tried to say, let's try to project the future by seeing what things have happened in the past. So when FDR closed the banks, we said maybe they'll close the banks. When they shut down the stock market from 9/11, we thought maybe they'll shut down the stock market. So what you have done is you've just stated with the JFK thing, the global size of this. It's like the JFK thing never has been resolved, and it's never going to be resolved the way things are going. People are just going to let it go. Well, some say yes, some say no. We don't know. We weren't born then. We don't know. And maybe if that is the warning sign for how UFOs will be handled, that is a tragedy that we shouldn't have. And maybe, by the way, one thing we've never spoken about, and this might be kind of intriguing because I don't even know if you know this. I think you know this because we it happened when we were writing the book. But there may be a part to this phenomenon that is more like John Keel-esque, you know, the guy that wrote the Mothman. Because here's what happened, folks. Rich and I were having nearly daily talks, as he pointed out. We'd kick things around. And I remember we had a talk one day where I didn't have any files open. I wasn't looking at a computer screen while I was on the phone saying, let's move paragraph 12 to, you know, none of that stuff. We were just shooting the breeze. And one of us, I can't remember who, brought up the idea that, well, you know, there is this thing about threes. And, you know, people waking up at 3:33 in the morning and, you know, the triad and the triangles. And we were just talking about threes, just bullshit. Okay. Never opened that file, nothing. I opened the file the next day. In the middle of that file, it was like somebody took, you know, a keyboard and held down the 3 button. And I had 3 lines of threes in that file. Now, I didn't put them there. You didn't put them there. For years, I've just went, I don't know how they got there. I mean, I never put them there. And all we did was talk about threes.
I'll just tell you I'm so glad you mentioned that, because if I knew it, I forgot it.
It's so strange. I mean, but it happened.
I sometimes think, I mean, you know, I got to wonder, what do we really understand what space and time is? Do we understand our place in this grand cosmos and reality? I'm sure we can't possibly truly comprehend it, but we do know that time is a dimension. And we do know that space and time are able to be manipulated in various ways. Hell, Puthoff wrote a paper called Space-Time Metric Engineering.
Right.
So I have asked myself many times, what is the true causality that we live in? Is there such a thing as fate and destiny? Is the past, present, and future, do they all exist at once? I will just tell you philosophically and personally, I do probably believe that. I do probably believe that we tend to think that we have this illusion of truly free will. I'm not saying we have no free will, but do we have as much as we think? I don't know. Are we just thoughts in the mind of God? These are thoughts that I think about a lot.
Some deep shit, my friend. Yes.
So this idea of the threes, and you know what? One of the coolest books that I did publish by another author is by Mike Clellan. There's a book called The Messengers, and it's a hell of a book. Talk about John Keel. Mike Clellan is in that tradition totally, and not to go into the whole thing here, but it's a book superficially about owls. And you think, well, why would owls be important? Well, Mike had a number of very bizarre, let's say paranormal-ish experiences that included owls. And he started a blog and he asked questions, talk about this weird experience with an owl and that one. And then tons of people started writing to him about their owl experiences. And he wrote a book. The bottom line is, when I finished editing that book, I really thought, are we living in a world where there's this meta intelligence that is managing us? You know, someone will say, all right, I've got Zabel for the next 5 years. Okay, I've got Dolan. How about we get them together? We'll have them do a book.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but I do genuinely wonder about these things because I'll guarantee anyone listening, they probably have thoughts in their head where they're like, they may think, have I been guided in one way or another? I think a lot of people have this. Now, maybe
listen, I feel like since we're talking about this, and I know I have to wrap up, I know that, but I still have to tell this story. When I was doing Dark Skies with my partner, Brent Friedman, he saw my UFO library and he said, hey, you know, you really should read The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. And it was a volume I didn't have in my library. So I got it and I was reading it, and it was in the backseat of my car. And I took my son to see a movie one night. This is while we were shooting Dark Skies. And as we're coming out of the movie, and it's night, so it's kind of a scary, semi-empty parking lot, you know, just a couple of lights there. And we see this guy at the end of the parking lot walking toward us. And it looked just a little odd. So I took my son and I moved him over to the other side of me. And I said, just, don't make eye contact. Just, let's just walk to our car. And so we're walking to the car, and this guy in a long black trench coat affair walks past us, and he's holding the Mothman prophecies.
You're kidding me.
I am not kidding you.
Wow.
So I just say when I don't have great answers for these things, and who does? Who would? And, but these things exist in life, and one doesn't know. So I guess we can at least end by saying there is a great mystery here. And, what we tried to do is see what would happen when at least an inkling about the great mystery was allowed to be discussed in the public forum, which, it hasn't been yet in a real significant way. So
we're very lucky to be doing, you and I are lucky to study the things that we do, but all of us, everyone watching this, we're all very lucky. Yeah. We are conscious entities on this little speck of dust in this little tiny part of this amazing cosmos. And we are conscious, and we are able to engage in abstract thought, and we are able to contemplate the existence of this massive cosmos. And we are able now finally to recognize some of the complexities of this little part of the universe in which we live, and that there certainly do seem to be others who are here with us. Why should that be so surprising?
No,
it's a big universe. And here we are, we're in this little tiny place, but we're figuring things out. And that's kind of an amazing thing. Will we get all of it? Never. We're never going to get the whole answer until we go to if there's another side and we can graduate, maybe then. But maybe even then is probably many, many stages of awareness that are ahead of us. But it's an incredible adventure, and we should all know, even on our worst day, our very worst day, the rent check's late, your girlfriend or your boyfriend just left you, whatever. You're still lucky to be in the game. You're still lucky to be here to ask these questions. It's a gift.
There's a quote attributed to 3 different physicists, so I won't even try. But the quote is simply, the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine. And if that's the case, then I think you're right. So we might as well get started, because it seems like a long-term project rather than a short-term once and done. Anyway, Rich, I just got to say, I could go on forever. It's such a joy to sort of reconnect with you on the air here and talk about this and to remember all those good times. I really do. I will put this, by the way, in the actual show, but we actually did photos during the writing of the book. And one of them is this black and white photo that I call the gunslinger photo, where we're sort of looking like we're Woodward and Bernstein or something. And I'm going to put this in this thing because I just remember at the time, we just felt like we were on kind of a mission to get this book done. It just needed to be done, and damn it, we did it. So I enjoyed every moment of it, my partner, and we'll stay in touch.
Same here. Thank you, Bryce. I know that photo, and it's a great picture.
All right, everybody. I hope to see you next time. Thank you, Rich Dolan. All right, talk later. Bye-bye.